Hello and welcome to Player 2's Ratchet Clank Rift Apart hands-off preview. You can go check out the written piece on the website player2.net.au, but what you're enjoying here is a video version that I recorded with Ryan Betson of the PopCulturists, and specifically for the players, the PopCulturists PlayStation podcast. You can of course go and subscribe to that on podcast services everywhere, as well as check out their YouTube channel, the PopCulturists, for a whole bunch of awesome content they produce as well. But Ryan and I partnered up to discuss the game and my experiences with this hands-off preview in depth, so I hope you enjoy it. Subscribe to the PopCulturists, subscribe to Player 2, and enjoy this preview. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is now just a month away.
Thanks, future Ryan. So we are very lucky today. We are joined by awesome friend of the show, Paul James from Player 2.
Most recurring guest.
Does this add to the tally?
I think it does.
This adds to the tally. So
Max doesn't hold that status anymore because he became an actual host. So he lost that when he became an actual host in the show.
Instantly.
All that just goes into the tally now.
So our most recurring guest on For the Players, that's the PopCulturists PlayStation podcast, which you hopefully should know because you listen to it right now. Paul had a very, very exciting opportunity this week. He went the closest you can get to behind closed door in a pandemic era with Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. What went down, Padge?
So I was invited, or Player 2 was invited, and I went out representing Player 2. Very fancy little digital portal presentation thing. We had Marcus Smith and a whole bunch of other key figures from Insomniac, basically presenting a whole bunch of cool parts of the upcoming Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. I nearly referred to another name that we've been jokingly calling it, Ripped Apart, which is 100% the name they should have gone with. But
did you ask them that? Could you have the opportunity?
I didn't have the opportunity to ask that question.
Plenty of time.
But we know it was the inspiration. So we got to see, there was about a 30-minute gameplay video that we watched. No annotations or no kind of commentary over the top. It was just purely like, here's some gameplay. You're going to see a bunch of Ratchet. You're going to see a bunch of Rivet. It's kind of, I mean, we've seen from the state of play a whole bunch of different sequences there. A lot of it was those sequences that you've seen in the state of play, but just expanded to kind of see, like, here's the full arc of how this scene plays out.
Well, that was going to be my first question. Like, is there gameplay that we have already seen? And the answer is obviously yes, but we're seeing it more contextually.
Yeah, more context, and I guess like, in its entirety. You know, like, here's how this sequence begins. Here's how it ends, and then what we've seen from that state of play was kind of splices of what happened in the middle. And now we're getting it all kind of compiled, and kind of you get to actually understand how the loop works, I guess, in some of these sequences.
So with this 30 minutes of gameplay, are there anything stand out that you feel that you should comment on?
I mean, of course, the visuals. Holy shit. I mean, we've all been saying this anyway, and you don't need to have this fancy gameplay experience that I did to be able to make that comment. But holy shit, like, just seeing it in action, the flow. I mean, I was never a big frame rate guy, but I've really started to come around to that this generation. Returnal actually was a real eye opener for that. But Ratchet's up the ante again in that space. I'm sure it's running probably at 60, just like Returnal was, but just, I guess I have that context with Ratchet and what I'd seen from before, and even the changes that occurred to Ratchet and Clank 2016. You know, these PS5 perks that have recently come to the game, and I've started to kind of understand that a little bit more, and I'm not such the scrub that I was before. Like, it looks incredible in that space, but in the gameplay space, I think most people will agree, just even based on what they've seen from the state of plays and various trailers that we've seen prior, like, it's not doing anything hugely new. Like, the DNA is very much intact, and it's just little things they're changing up, some cool new weapons, like the Ricochet, for example, which
I was just about to ask, does this gameplay show off cool new weapons? Yeah,
the Ricochet is a really cool new one. So it's like this, it's basically like a pinball machine sort of gun.
Yeah.
Works. I mean, the way they pitched it when Marcus and the team were talking about it is like a pinball machine. So like you shoot the ball out and it'll bounce off their heads a few times. Eventually it cracks open. You get some like sparkly lights and stuff like you would get in a pinball machine before eventually returning to your gun. So like that's kind of cool in the sense that there's not many weapons in the franchise that it's basically, you know, one use, but it, you know, returns. Mm-hmm. It's you'll typically exhaust the ammo capacity of a certain weapon and then that's it. Whereas with this, technically infinite, but it's not in your possession for a while, so you can't just be spamming shit everywhere. Or
so you're not launching numerous pinballs at enemies.
Yeah.
So it's like one pinball.
Like it'll hit him, and then it just and then they spoke about they clearly enjoy the fact that, like, you'll shoot at an enemy, and then bang, it'll just keep slamming into the top of their head afterwards if that's what you want it to do. So, but it's not, you can't just instantly recall it or instantly just back out. Like there's a little bit of a risk reward in terms of the time that's going to take to recall the ball and then shoot again. And
there'd be hang time, right? So like as that happens, you're left gunless for a small window of time while it's bouncing on this person.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyone that comes up close, you're going to have to swing, swing into melee and those sorts of things, I'm guessing. I don't know if you'll be able to, like, the ball can keep doing its thing while you swap to a different weapon. That's one of those sort of things that's a little bit unclear, because they were really trying to demo, like, here's how this weapon works and here's how this weapon works and those sorts of things. So they weren't really kind of combining them all in that sort of context. There was certainly some gameplay, which was your very natural thing, was, okay, I'm toggling to this weapon and this weapon and this weapon, but there was no emphasis on here's how I can use the ricochet in this scenario and toggle to this one. I would have liked for them to focus on that a little bit to clarify questions like that one. But we're gonna get some answers pretty soon. So
it's right around the corner. So in terms of Rivet, so Rivet's obviously the big thing. She is the other Lombax in the marketing. How does she fit into this? How does she play in this gameplay footage? Because you mentioned there's some interviews as well. Was she mentioned as a sort of key piece of... Because I imagine she's the one big difference right now. So probably have a lot to say about it.
Certainly narratively she's the big difference, but otherwise, I guess she's what actually grounds the game in normal Ratchet and Clank sort of formula. I mean, narrative-wise, she is just alt-universe Ratchet.
Oh, okay.
So
is this playing into that dimension rift thing that they got going on? Okay.
Yeah, so the whole thing is like, what's his name? Dr. Nefarious. He opens the rift to a whole other universe, a universe where he always wins, and on the other side of this universe, it's not Ratchet, it's Rivet. And she basically is, like, she plays exactly the same as Ratchet. What we... without knowing, I guess, all the context around it, they were a bit careful about what story stuff they showed off, but it crosses from a point where Ratchet's on his own, which is a thing that we've seen in past Ratchet and Clank games. Like, he'll go off on his own, Clank is elsewhere for whatever reason. You're playing with Ratchet on his own, but Rivet has stumbled onto Clank, so Clank gets mounted onto her back, and so all the ways that you would typically play Ratchet and Clank with Ratchet and Clank previously is actually Rivet and Clank in this particular case, or at least in this some portion of the game anyway, which is kind of cool, I guess, narratively. Ultimately, in the gameplay sense, it's the same as what you like. It's a warm blanket for people who've played Ratchet and Clank games before, because you've done this. It's just what's going to be cool about it is kind of hearing the way Rivet interacts with the world and hearing her talk about how things are, because it's very different. You've got Nefarious City as opposed to Metropolis. Metropolis, yeah. Or am I just mixing up my Supermans and shit?
I think you are.
I've just gone completely blank on the name of the main city.
That's all right.
But it's something like that. It ends in Opolis.
It's something Opolis.
Yeah.
I believe, yeah.
But Metropolis is definitely Superman. So, mess that up. So it'll just be really interesting to kind of get her insights into the world and what's happened and that sort of thing. And I mean, we've heard it in the trailers, like Clank is referring to, we've got to go find my friend. So as Ratchet's, I guess, pursuit of Clank starts to heat up, like they're going to start to cross over in that space, and nothing at any point has revealed like what is it like when these two meet, because I assume that's going to be a pretty pivotal moment in the actual game, and what that does for the interactions. Like, who knows? That could even have massive gameplay implications, but...
Well, with that in mind, the gameplay that you saw, where does it take place within the story? Was that disclosed?
So, familiar locations, there's little sequences that we see them heading through Nefarious City. Rivet specifically heading through Nefarious City. You see, working with some vendors and those sorts of things in the shops. But the bulk of the actual gameplay, in terms of what they're showing off in combat, we're going back to a lot of familiar locations from past Ratchet and Clank games, and they've just been revitalized and re-energized visually. They've added a lot of depth to them. They've added a lot of scope. They've added a lot of life. That was one of the things that was really emphasized in some of the interviews, is what we've had narratively in the past is, our one story, whatever it is that Ratchet and Clank are off to do, and then they go through a bunch of different planets where there's fun and combat to be had. Now, that's still obviously going to exist, but what they're really trying to emphasize is that each planet you go to is going to have its own little mini story of some sort. There's going to be little arcs to these planets that you go to, and it's not just about navigating it to get to the end to collect the gold bolts on the way and proceed to continue Ratchet and Clank's adventure. It's that's obviously still going to be there, but there's so much more that you can actually immerse yourself in, which is really exciting. I mean, Ratchet's not necessarily known for its amazing storytelling or rich worlds or those sort of things, but it looks like they're really looking to explore that here, and they've got decades almost now of stuff that they can work through, and so that's going to be really cool. But it is what we've seen anyway so far is environments that we've known, that we've loved, and they've polished them up, they've updated them. There's new grind rails in them, a few new enemies, giant mech thing, which I think we saw in the state of play, if I remember, that big giant robot thing.
I'm not too sure.
I can't remember now. The two, it's a bit blurry now as to what I saw in the state of play versus what I saw in this event.
So if it isn't in the state of play, spoilers, there might be a giant mech apparently.
There's a big mech thing, and you've got you're navigating grind rails, and they're all like, it's very scripted in the sense that, like, there's one point where it's trying to grab Rivet and Clank, not Ratchet and Clank, Rivet and Clank, and like you slide like its hands are starting to close around, and you slide,
that's cool.
Like, go straight through the hand. To get to another platform, you kind of grind across its shoulders at one point. Like, there's all sorts of little things. Like, they're all scripted things, which has always been the case for Ratchet and Clank anyway.
So you mentioned that
the context is cool.
So you've mentioned that we're looking at decades worth of points of reference here, and then we'll jump into it because you mentioned there was some interviews and stuff afterwards. But so in terms of that reference point, right? So we know that the 2016 Ratchet and Clank was essentially a remake of the first game. With this, where does this sit in chronological order?
So
is this a follow up from the 2016? Is it standalone? Is it like back? What was the last one on prior to the 2016?
Into the Nexus? It picks up from Into the Nexus, which was basically. I mean, it took them a little while to get to that point. So there was the core trilogy of future games: the Tools of Destruction, Quest for Booty, and then A Crack in Time. And then they kind of experimented in other formats for a while. There was All for One, there was Full Frontal Assault, and there was some tower defense stuff, there was multiplayer games. They kind of deviated from the core formula there, and people started to criticize them a little bit because they weren't quite executing on the level that you expect. And Into the Nexus was kind of, okay, let's get back to the core idea again, and they continued that narrative somewhat. And this is picking up from that, though it was really heavily emphasized. You don't need to have played the other games. At the end of Into the Nexus, spoilers for anyone who's concerned about spoilers from Into the Nexus, Clank had just built this what was referred to as the Dimensionator that will help Ratchet, with his goal being to help Ratchet meet other Lombax, because he's the lone Lombax.
I've just put two and two together from this Dimensionator. Is that what the riffs are?
And that so the Dimensionator is what Nefarious takes, or like steals. This big parade that's being there to celebrate the accomplishments of Ratchet for all these years. Clank put together a little surprise for him, which was this Dimensionator that he's kind of rebuilt and polished up and gotten good to go, so that Ratchet can go and meet other Lombax. Like, he's the lone Lombax in the whole universe. It's a really nice little sentiment.
That's really heartwarming.
And then Nefarious fucks it all up. So that's what gets him dragged through, and ultimately he does presumably get to meet another Lombax in the form of Rivet. I don't know when that'll happen or how it'll happen, but I assume it's going to. But that's kind of the core hook there, and that's what connects them. But if you hadn't played Into the Nexus or any other Ratchet and Clank game beforehand, including 2016, you wouldn't be hurt here. It's like, okay, Clank's a nice guy. He's got a thing for his friend. Oh, Ratchet's one of his kind. Okay, but there's going to be someone in another universe. That's really cool. Let's go off and like, you could get by without having that context, which is nice for players new and old. And they're certainly looking to hit a massive market with this game. That's blatantly clear in terms of just even the marketing stuff that we've seen. Ignore what I got access to. Like, the way they're trying to present this stuff in a marketing sense is they're trying to get this in front of as many people as possible.
Yeah, no, I think that's what I. So like that's
probably
awesome.
Why they didn't call it Rift Apart instead of Ripped Apart.
Makes sense. Like, they're not gonna. Yeah, they can't really go from the mid 2000s dirty names like they
going commando and up their arsenal and. Again,
I would appreciate it. The immature 31-year-old, which is myself, would be like, fart. So I would have certainly appreciated that. But as you said, so you got to sit down and have a chat with some of the leads, some of the
No,
devs
they spoke to us. So I was just kind of sitting on the other end of a computer, and they spoke to us. But
that's fine. It's fine. That's a one-way conversation is still a conversation.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool. I got to speak to Marcus Smith and the team.
Yeah. So you spoke out. You looked like a lecture, I guess. It said you know.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Which isn't too bad. What are some of the big things they hit in this little keynote discussion?
For the most part, it's what we've discussed so far. But one of the things that was really, really cool that we haven't touched on so far is some of the accessibility stuff.
Oh, really?
And I guess this will obviously appeal to you with some of your outside work.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, I am a mental health worker, and I use video games as therapy. I work with people with obviously mental health challenges as well as ability challenges. So accessibility options are a big plus for me.
Yeah, and so the ability challenges I think is one of the main things that they drove the point home on this, and they're bringing every accessibility feature that was in Miles Morales, so I guess their most recent release.
Yeah.
Everything from that's coming across, but then they've added some really cool features on top of it. One of them that was particularly of interest because you don't necessarily there doesn't need to be some sort of a challenging inability too that we've just discussed. It can also just be a player like myself sometimes who's a bit of a scrub that needs a little bit of extra support. They've added a feature that allows you to basically just slow the game down, and you can map it to the D-pad or whatever you ultimately wanted to do. But they're letting you customize in that sense. You can map this feature to your D-pad, and then if you're going through a tough grinding sequence, or maybe even the combat's a bit rough and it's just getting a bit crazy around you, and maybe that's too much or too challenging or whatever, well, you can just slow time down, do what you need to do, whether it's navigate that difficult platforming sequence or whatever, and then as soon as you get to the other side, just press the button again and it's back to real time.
Okay,
which is kind of cool. So it'll allow people to progress.
So if you're in a situation and you've got a wave of dudes coming at you and it's getting too much and there's you need to find your escape route. So you can slow it down for a second, you can pan the camera, you can see a little path to get out of this little kerfuffle, or say that you're trying to get a traversal and there's like a platform that's moving up and down, and you can slow it down to time your jump better.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic in that sense. And there's other little visual things that have been brought across. I think The Last of Us Part 2 in terms of some of the kind of the way they, and obviously I'm no real expert because I don't have some of the difficulties here that they're looking to speak to, but we've seen a lot of footage from The Last of Us Part 2, for example, and how they kind of color coded enemies versus the environment versus the player character. That seems to be coming across as well. There's lots of really, really cool features like that have been added to the game to make it as accessible as it can be to as many people as possible, regardless of whatever your potential difficulty might be. You should be covered, from what I can tell.
That's amazing.
I don't want to speak out of turn because everyone's different. Everyone's potentially contending with something different here.
Yeah, we all have different challenges, and
they are looking to address as many as possible.
If it's anything like what the Last of Us Part 2 can offer, that's amazing.
Which is best in class.
Yeah, even what Miles Morales offers is also brilliant as well. Just the complete customization of what you need to be able to play the game better.
Yeah.
And if they're hitting that space here, that's going to be a massive, massive win. Because Ratchet and Clank, just by design, is quite appealing to almost everyone. It's nice, it's bright, it's colorful, like it looks friendly, but
at the same time, it can also get pretty overwhelming at times.
It can, yeah.
Whether that is through the platforming or the combat or whatever, like you can get yourself into sticky situations and meet an unfortunate end fairly often if you're not careful. So
it's
not in a Returnal or Dark Souls sort of way, but that's just how the combat can evolve sometimes, that it can get pretty, it's sensory overload in a lot of ways, and you don't know where to necessarily start. And to be able to just slow things down, for example, that'll make a huge difference to people.
But not even just abilities challenges, right? Both you and I are parents. I have a 4-year-old, and how old's your oldest?
2.5 and then 7 months.
Yeah, so he's not quite ready to play games yet, but my son is. My son loves playing games with me. And, even though he plays Miles Morales, right? He played Paw Patrol. He got credits in that game again the other day, by the way. That Donut County are his 2 favorites right now. But he and I play...
Donut County, really?
He loves Donut County. Complete side conversation. But he and I play Spider-Man together a lot as well, because he loves Spider-Man. So all he does is swing around the city primarily and just finds bad guys and punches them and throws trash cans at people. But He's been able to grasp that
and
pretty
becomes
well.
becomes a rack of clothes and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. It's awesome.
Sorry, Insomniac.
But no, he has an absolute great time, and like initially he had a minor hurdle when it come to like we've not done any of this campaign together because he can't keep up.
Yeah.
But with Ratchet, because I have a feeling he's going to look at it and be like, "Ooh, yeah, I want to play that," and so at least
very cat-like creature and his metal buddy.
Yeah, he loves robots as well. Like he's always going to take a shine to Clank, pun intended. And like he's going to want to play, and this may make it possible for my 4-year-old to play this game with me.
Yeah, if
like,
not just
in
those heated moments to just be able to slow things down or make a massive difference.
Yeah, but not just sit on my lap, but to play it himself,
actively participate.
Yeah, and have that sense of achievement as well. Because watching him roll credits on donut counting, my heart, the feeling. He was like, I did it. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, dude, you did it. He's all full of himself.
Now here's Demon Souls. Go for it.
Yeah. His return or get wrecked. And then
he'll outshine you from what I'm hearing.
Oh, dude, I'm trash at Returnal, so he certainly could come through. But
another thing, like you mentioned, things shining, like the visual effects that we're seeing at play. I know I've spoken about how the game looks gorgeous, but they were talking about how. And they used Clank as the perfect example. He's made of stainless steel, and what we'd had up to this point was basically a Clank where if light hit him, he was just like a mirror and it'd just reflect off him. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of showed what they've done texture-wise with Clank, so that when light hits it, sure, there's a little bit that will reflect back, but the way it distorts and refracts and
so ray tracing essentially, yeah.
And then on top of that, where all the ray tracing kind of falls into place as well, and they kind of. Nothing that we'd actually be able to see when we're playing the game, but just kind of behind the scenes tech stuff like here, and they just toggled a different cone of vision on, and here's where all like the ray tracing's hitting in these different spots, and to me it just looked like the entire location, like holy shit, everything is hit. I think that was probably by design. Like here's the location, see where the light touches, yeah, all of it.
It's our kingdom.
That's ray traced. See that shadowy spot? Never go there, Simba.
Yeah, but like even with Miles Morales as an example, like it's the subtle details that ray tracing can deliver with just how it reflects off his suit and whatnot in certain ways, and you may not notice it all the time, but when you do, you go, damn. And I think from what you're saying, Clank may be that same space. It just might hit him one way, and you go, ooh.
But I think the difference in it's just purely down to the nature of the settings and the games, I guess, is that. When you're talking gritty New York versus just whatever you want in Ratchet and Clank, like they can really take far more advantage of this because it's just the nature of the environments that you're navigating. Like they can do whatever they want. They can design things however they want to really highlight what the technology can do. Spider-Man and Miles Morales look amazing. The ray tracing is fantastic in them, but you are constrained somewhat by the attempted realism and certain locations you go and visit. Obviously, the light hitting a skyscraper or something like that, and all the windows can do all sorts of cool things. But there's a potential here with Ratchet in that sense that just isn't possible with something that's grounded in reality, like Spider-Man. Outside of the fact that you're a person pretending to be a spider, swinging off that's where the reality takes a bit of a dive. But.
So you mentioned technology. Now, one of the biggest marketing things around Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is how it's using this SSD within the PlayStation 5. Did they touch upon how that's working with... Because obviously one of the biggest things that we've seen so far from State of Play is that seamless transition between dimensions. Right? Is that the yeah, so you're transitioning between these dimensions.
Within the rifts, but
between these locales,
rifts,
the rifts, sorry. So did they touch upon how they're achieving this?
Not massively. They were trying, hiding some of the back end, technical wizardry, but it is as instantaneous as you think it is. And they've got some little pocket dimensions, they refer to them as, kind of scattered within the various locations. They showed us one in the gameplay there, which is just it's an opportunity to kind of collect some armor and those sort of things, which is also something we should probably discuss.
Yes.
But you jump in these little pocket dimensions and it's just boom, instant, totally different environment. Not a whole other planet like what we've seen in the trailers, where Ratchet's kind of falling through rift after rift after rift and you're seeing all these different locations. This is kind of, its own little separate space, little closed off side area, but it's instant and you can turn around and look back through it and you'll see the environment you just came from, and Same idea when you get to the other end. It's just everything's just instant, which is really, really cool. The armor that we just discussed a moment ago, you can outfit your Ratchet however you want, or your Rivet however you want. There's actually some stat buffs and perks attached to that, which I don't think they mentioned pretty casually. So like, what I take from that is they're not
minor
essential.
RPG sort of things.
I think even more minor than what we'd normally say when it comes to that. Like they outlined it, but didn't spend a hell of a lot of time with it, which makes me think like, okay, you, the hardcore Ratchet fan, you might want to dabble in this and make your Ratchet look like this, and you might want to reap the benefits of this perk and this buff or whatever. But I think if you continue through the game without ever approaching one of these pocket dimensions and ever getting a new piece of armor, it's not gonna impact your experience at all, because it's about the gunplay and the melee in that, as opposed to how many hits can you take, or slightly less susceptible to this sort of attack. Like, that doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's just about outplaying your opponent in a Ratchet and Clank game, as opposed to having that slight buff or whatever, that slight sort of edge. Okay. So it was kind of cool that it's there, though, for those who really want to explore it. Now, and it provides the justification to go and explore these pocket dimensions in the first place.
Okay. I've got like 1,000 questions going through. I'm trying to suss them all out at once. So, is there anything else that you want to? We have gone for a bit longer than we anticipated, but is there anything else that stood out to you? Because one of the things, like, you and I have had, like, obviously, this has all been hidden conversations. You've not told me anything. One of the words you did give me, though, you just said Pixar to me.
Oh, I mean, well, yeah, again, this kind of cycles.
So I asked you, I'm like, what did you see? Tell me. And you're like, I can't tell you. I'm like, I know you can't tell me. What can you tell me? And you went, think Pixar. Yeah,
I mean, they weren't even shy about it. Like, and I referenced it in the article, player2.net.au. They themselves in the little presentations constantly referred to film quality, and a couple of people just straight up even said Pixar. That was kind of the benchmark. And look, it's hard to tell until you've actually got it in your hands. When you're kind of watching a streamed presentation, it loses a little bit of its quality in just the sheer nature of the process. But it looks the part.
Because that's what I say. Because
it really looks the part.
You said Pixar. Does it feel like Pixar? Does it look like Pixar? Because that
fluidity.
That achievement within like a game space. Like, we're looking at Kenna, right, which is coming up soon.
Yep.
And that looks like that Pixar level of quality as well. So are we mirroring that here in Ratchet?
It looks the part.
Ooh.
And I mean, I think where it best shows is that I look at some of those some of those sequences where they've gone from cutscene to gameplay, and I can't tell at what point it transitioned. Wow. Like, I don't think I'll find myself in that situation that I think some people described. I think when they were playing maybe Uncharted 4 or something like that for the first time, and like you're standing there and Nate's just kind of hands on hips or whatever, and hang on, I'm in control now. Like, I'm not going to have that moment simply because of the way they swing the camera. Like, okay, you've pivoted into a position here where you're telling me that you want me to now go play. But if I didn't have that kind of that gamer sense, like having been there and done it and understood how games work, I would have been fooled into going, oh, this is still a scene. It'll end soon, I guess. And then the HUD will slide in and I'll go. But you wouldn't know it. Like, it just it bleeds together that well, which is really, really cool.
Man, all you've done is add to my excitement. Because as I was discussing in last week's episode of the PlayStation Pod, that I was chatting to Max and I said, look, PlayStation so far in this generation have released two of the most hardcore games that you can. They've got Dark Souls and Returnal. I am so excited for Ratchet because it looks fun and charming and
I might be able to finish it.
And I might be able to finish it, not just get pounded into the dirt like with Returnal or Dark Souls. So all you've done today is just add more excitement to me.
Fill your heart.
And it makes me very happy and confident with what this game's going to be. So thank you so much, Paul, for your time. But you want to leave me with one? Are you going to leave me with one more thing?
I'm going to go one more thing. DualSense.
Oh, of course.
Now, again, I obviously couldn't hold the thing in my hands. It was a hands-off preview, but everything I discussed, I mean, and you've played Returnal, so you know what happens when you collect the obolites, for example, and you feel like the controller rippling. You know what happens when the rain hits, and I mean, that was also in Astro's Playroom as well. But like the way they're looking to use the haptics and the triggers.
Picking up the bolts and stuff.
Yeah, but even things like, so you know how the alt fire works in Returnal, for example?
Yeah.
We've got a similar sort of thing in place here where like so it locks at a certain point, And that's so like if you're using the combustor, for example, it locks at a point, and so you might only shoot one shot. But if you pull through that, like a double shot, for example, or whatever the case happens to be. And obviously you can upgrade your guns in the Ratchet and Clank franchise. So I don't know if all of a sudden when you got 4, whether it locks in 4 spots or maybe it's 2 and 2, or how they want to do that remains to be seen. But like they are bringing those sort of little features across as well. And then there's the haptics with as you scoop up the bolts or whatever. But even that they were discussing like when a ship flies overhead, that you'll feel the rumble from one side of the controller as it drifts across the other, because you're going to, like, if you're standing in place and the thing is kind of soaring fairly close overhead, you're going to feel it over here before you start to feel it over here. So that's going to be reflected in the controller as well. So that's really cool too, in terms of just that extra layer of immersion. This thing's going to be pretty sweet.
Oh man, that one more thing was like, you E3'd me just then, and it was amazing.
Yeah. One more thing, fuck, Ratchet and Clank's looking hot.
It is looking fantastic. If you want to look into a little bit further, there is a link in the description. It is go check out player2.net.au. Paul here has a massive preview. Go check it out. We're recording right now before it goes live, so I've not read it yet myself, but it is live right now. Go and check it out. Take it in. So big thank you, as I said, Paul, for joining me and having this chat here today.
That's good to be back. I'm a guy looking for a PlayStation show.
Yeah, you're a free agent right now.
Free agent.
PlayStation space. So big thank you, and obviously, on behalf of Paul, saying big thank you for PlayStation Australia providing the opportunity for him, and then I'm happy to coattail on that opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sony and PlayStation, for providing me this opportunity. It was really, really awesome.
All right, well, back to future Ryan and Max.